Dear friends, welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Department of Sociology, Tilak Maharashtra Vidya-mitra, Pune. Today we are going to look at a module titled The Rise of Shudras and Ati-Shudras in Indian Politics, which is part of the Political Sociology paper. Who were the Shudras and the Ati-Shudras? What was their place in the Varna system? How did Hinduism as a religion influence this idea of untouchability in the ancient period and during the colonial period? What were the repercussions of untouchability in the national movement? What were the roles of social reformers like Jyotiba Phule, Periyar and others? What kinds of organizations did the lower caste people organize in order to contest power with the upper caste, Savarna caste in the Indian context? This module will try and understand how a whole public discourse and how a whole political society evolved that contested power with the Savarnas in the post-colonial and late colonial period. The rise of Shudras and Ati-Shudras in Indian politics. Who are the Shudras and Ati-Shudras? Scholars have argued that these two Varnas, Shudras and Ati-Shudras, are particular invention of Indian society. Most of the other ancient societies have three forms of social groups which consisted of priests, the warriors and the cattle and agrarian classes, which would loosely correspond with Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas in Indian society. These two categories of the Shudras and Ati-Shudras are a specific Indian invention, is understood to have been made in certain historical context of Indian society, which is largely explained through the intermingling between the Aryans and the native residents of post-Harappa civilization and material relationships prevailing in these societies. The formulations of Shudras and Ati-Shudras are related with the evolutions of clans, Gotras and the observance of the principles of endogamy and exogamy beginning from the Brahmins and followed by the other Gotras. However, B.R. Ambedkar argues that whether the Shudras were Aryans or aboriginal inhabitants of India or tribes produced by the union of the Aryans with the other is of little practical moment. What is of significance for him is that they were at an early period placed in a class by themselves and received the fourth or the last degree rank, yet at a considerable distance from the three superior castes. The reason why this does not make great sense to Ambedkar is that the present state of Shudras, which are a collection of castes drawn from heterogeneous stocks and are racially different from the original Shudras of the Indo-Aryan society. And secondly, the category of Shudras as a people is of no political significance for him. Rather, what is important is the legal system of pains and penalties to which they are subjected. For Ambedkar, this system of pains and penalties was originally devised by the Brahmins to deal with the Shudras of the Indo-Aryan society who have ceased to exist as a distinct, separate, identifiable community and have turned into multiplicities of castes. But the code intended to deal with the Shudras and Ati-Shudras has remained in operation since then and is now applied to all low caste Hindus. How this happened has been a matter of historical inquiry. There are many historical explanations available for this. Ambedkar's explanation is that the Shudras of Indo-Aryan society in course of time became so degraded as a consequence of the severity of the Brahminical laws that low caste Hindus came to occupy a very low state in public life. As a result, two consequences happened. First was a change in the connotation of the word Shudra. The word Shudra lost its original meaning of being the name of a particular community and became a general name for a low-class people who were termed without any civilization of their own, without culture, respect and dignity. The second consequence pertained to the widening of the meaning of the word Shudra, brought in its train the widening of the application of the code. It is in this way that the so-called Shudras of the present day have become subject to the code, though they are not Shudras in the original sense of the word. In the process of historical development of socio-economic processes, the Shudras and Ati-Shudras remained outside the socio-cultural and economic processes. Shudras and Ati-Shudras in colonial period. The caste of the Shudras and Ati-Shudras got a new recognition during the colonial period as the colonial administration and Christian missionaries worked as enabling factors for social and economic upliftment of these caste groups. These Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes are largely identified with the category of scheduled caste. These categories have largely emerged from the colonial administration's concerns for the dismaying social and economic conditions of depressed classes who face multiple deprivations on account of their low position in the hierarchy of the Hindu caste system. The colonial administration identified the caste groups which were historically disadvantaged with depressed classes who were later in 1935 in the Government of India Act 1935 marked as scheduled castes. The Act defined the depressed group as such caste, races or tribes or parts of groups within caste, races or tribes which appear to His Majesty in the Council to correspond to classes of persons formerly known as the depressed classes, as His Majesty in Council may prefer. This discretionary definition was clarified in the Government of India Scheduled Caste Order 1936, which contained a list or schedule of castes throughout the British administered provinces. Colonial administration's decision to identify depressed classes as scheduled caste followed after a long battle waged by social reform movement led by a series of social reformers and leaders coming from Shudras and Ati-Shudras caste. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who emerged as the principal crusader against untouchability, assumed the historic role of drafting the Indian Constitution of Free India. He introduced the famous Article 11 of the Drafting Committee on 1st November 1947, which carried through the following resolution, quote, "Untouchability is abolished and its practice in any form is forbidden. The enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offence which shall be punishable in accordance with law." The social reform movement in colonial periods brought caste discrimination and oppression to center stage. Social reform movements began as early as the 19th century. Jyotirao Phule led a major social reform for improving the status of Shudras and Ati-Shudras through their access to education and recognition of separate economic and social interests. The social reform movements were not confined to any particular region, rather they were pan-Indian phenomena. The common characteristics of these movements were that they sought reforms in both social and religious life. The Dravid Kazhagam movement of Periyar, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, sought a different identity for Shudra and Ati-Shudra caste. His movement sought to denounce Hindu society by publicly burning the effigy of Ram and identified with counter-narrative of the virtuousness of Ravana. In Kerala, the Ezava movement of Narayana Guru culminated with the establishment of a new religious sect called Sri Narayan Dharma Pratipalana Yogam in Kerala. Similarly, the Sanatani movement of the Chamars in Chhattisgarh plains in eastern Madhya Pradesh also sought to come out of Hindu society and established an independent religious sect. The most pervasive Shudra and Ati-Shudra caste movement led by B.R. Ambedkar, curiously reaching its climax of mass conversion to Buddhism. The most articulate expression is provided by Ambedkar that holds overthrowing of Hindu religious ideological hegemony as a necessary condition for the liberation of Shudras and Ati-Shudra caste. The culmination of these separate identities of Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes was most visible during the historic debate on communal award in early 1930s, when the depressed classes were recognized on par with other religious groups. The communal award of August 4, 1932, after the conclusions of two successive roundtable conferences in London, assigned separate electorates not only for the Muslims, Sikhs, Christians and several other categories, but also extended it to the depressed classes. This led to the historic fast unto death by Gandhi and the subsequent signing of the Pune Pact between B.R. Ambedkar and Madan Mohan Malviya on September 24, 1932. According to this agreement, a new formula was evolved in which separate electorates were replaced by reserved constituencies for depressed classes. These events are seen as historic achievements of Shudras and Ati-Shudra caste movements in colonial period, which had far-reaching impacts on making of lower caste as political subjects. Political rise of the Shudras and Ati-Shudras in post-independent India. Post-independent India became a liberal democracy to be governed by the constitution. A new liberal democratic India did not only promise equal citizenship and equal opportunity to all irrespective of caste and religions, it appealed people to imagine a new egalitarian society. Gopal Guru observes that historically disadvantaged segments of the population found liberal democracy attractive because it offered them an opportunity to acquire and then expand normative spaces involving not just equality, liberty, and rights, but self-respect and dignity. Liberal democracy as an attractive ideal thus invokes different degrees of subaltern involvement in the project of producing an egalitarian India. About the nationalist sincerity when it came to resolving the caste questions. Dalits were not sure whether the nationalist elite, which was divided on social issues, would support a nationalist resolution on the caste question. In fact, Dalits led by Ambedkar feared that the socially dominant sections would hijack independent India and manipulate liberal democracy in order to consolidate and expand their own power through the reproduction of the old hierarchical order that placed Dalits at the bottom. Dalits, however, treated liberal democracy as the initial rather than the sufficient condition for the realization of their normative goals. Ambedkar expected that the Indian Constitution as a moral text would create spaces that would enable the Dalit to acquire self-description as subjective agents, and liberal institutions would help them reject the negative description of servile objects that had long been imposed upon them. Self-esteem, equal respect for persons, equality before law, and equal civil and political rights, which are central to the practice of liberalism, were the cornerstones in this. The Dalit political discourse has produced a concrete alternative to the mainstream nationalist formulation in all the realms of public reason. The discourse legitimizes the thirst for political power as it is one of the prime instruments in bringing a radical change in social relationships. Electoral politics was an inherent part of liberal democracy. Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes recognized the power of their numerical strengths in electoral processes. The most striking feature of the post-independence period in the 1960s and 70s became the rise of the backward castes. The backward castes, a term coined in the post-independence period, came to characterize those caste groups which were placed between the scheduled caste at the bottom and the Brahmins and Rajputs at the top. With numerical strengths, Yadav in UP and Bihar, Jats in Punjab and Haryana, Marathas in Maharashtra, Vokaligas in Karnataka, and Gondars in Tamil Nadu emerged as the most powerful caste in electoral politics. The characteristics of these castes are defined by M.N. Srinivas's phrase, the dominant caste. The concept of dominant caste is largely defined in terms of large in numbers, well organized, exercising economic and social power. In electoral processes, they consolidated the caste identity to take advantage of their numbers to gain greater share in political power. These caste groups made to be constitutionally recognized as other backward castes or classes to distinguish them from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Soon these parties rose to determine the national politics and began to push their agenda. In 1977, when the first time a non-Congress government came to power, the leaders of these castes pushed for reservations in government jobs similar to scheduled castes. As a result, the Janata government appointed the Backward Class Commission, known as the Mandal Commission, under the chairmanship of B.P. Mandal, who himself came from the Yadav caste of Bihar. The commission held that caste will still be the main indicator of backwardness. Based upon a comprehensive survey in states, the commission identified 3,743 specific castes as backward. It came to a conclusion that more than 50% of the population of India belong to backward castes, and they are poorly represented in administration, especially at the higher level. It observed that only OBCs filled 12.55% of all posts in central government and a mere 4.83% of Class 1 jobs. In its recommendation to address under-representation of OBCs, the Mandal Commission asked for 27% of all posts in central government to be reserved for these castes. This was to be in addition to the 22.5% already set apart for the scheduled castes and tribes. The severe under-representation of the OBCs in administration was hurdle for the backward caste to rise to the occasion of political opportunities. This was the question of share in political power in proportion to their number. Further, this became the question of the representation and identity for these backward caste people. Even though the material benefits accruing from these positions are limited to the members of the family who would take advantage of reservations to rise to acquire power, these were the questions of dignity and social status. The recommendations of the Mandal Commission were not taken up by the Congress regimes that followed Janata government in 1980, and the leaders of the backward castes did not give up on this question. Rather, it became a key electoral question in 1980s and led to an electoral success in 1989 when a Janata Dal government came to power on the promise of implementing the recommendations. Henceforth, 27% of all vacancies in the government of India were made reserved for the socially and educationally backward classes identified by the Commission. The wave of the Mandal Commission led to the rise of backward caste politics. Two notable leaders from Yadav caste, Mulayam Singh Yadav, who went on to become Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh later in 1989, and Lalu Prasad Yadav, who became Chief Minister of Bihar early in 1990. These two leaders saw their phenomenal rise in Indian politics on the plan of Mandal Commission politics. With political power at hand, these castes gains in economic strength and social prestige. The politics of backward castes promised to be inclusive for other backward castes and minorities as well. The rate of electoral success of these new backward caste formation was such that in 1989, the Congress fared disastrously, winning a mere 19 seats in the two states. When mid-term elections were held 2 years later, it fared even worse, winning just 5 seats in UP and only 1 in Bihar. Since then, these backward caste politics have become a force to reckon with. In the time of politics of identity and power sharing, a new question was in the making under the leadership of Kanshiram, who claimed to inherit the legacy of B.R. Ambedkar. The political experiment of Kanshiram, who also sought to form a new bloc largely defined as non-Brahminic and to be named as politics of Bahujans. Kanshiram, who rose from the politics of trade unions of scheduled castes, formed his first political party named as Dalit Shoshit Sangram Samiti or DS4, with a broader philosophical appeal in the fight for the rights of the oppressed, and thus reflected the unwavering influence of Dalit social movement on him. He prepared the ground for the political outfit with founding the All India Backward and Minority Communities Employee Federation or BAMSEF. Over a decade, Kanshiram mobilized educated Dalits at different levels, involving people in building the discourse and organization. Within a decade time, BAMSEF had a membership of 2 lakhs, many of them graduates and postgraduates. This was a trade union of the scheduled caste elite, which, in the leader's words, would form the think tank, the talent bank, and financial bank for the depressed classes as a whole. Kanshiram built upon Ambedkar's understanding of the Dalit as a community which was not only economically exploited, culturally segregated, and socially discriminated, but remained untouchable in the realm of political power. He sought to mainstream Dalits through acquiring power. He advocated the capture of power as one of the main objectives for emancipating the lower caste from the elite domination. Kanshiram's slogan for capturing power for emancipation of Dalits brought the most significant change in the psyche of Dalit masses by providing an umbrella, identity, futuristic vision, myths, social ideology, and a political strategy to become one of the most significant players in the game of power politics in contemporary India. He went on to found Bahujan Samaj Party in 1985, which from the very beginning symbolized the political aspiration of the downtrodden, oppressed masses in India. Kanshiram asked his followers to further the legacy of Ambedkar, who during the Communal Pact in 1939 at the All India Depressed Classes Congress at Nagpur had wished to establish Dalit as a ruling class in India. In Kanshiram's understanding, it was an imperative that the political reins should come in the hands of the untouchables, and it was the goal which could have been achieved only by unifying fragmented Dalit castes and build a new political identity. The distinctive contribution of Kanshiram was to provide a practical strategy for social revolution, which was to be materialized only through social engineering of building a larger social coalition of castes. And it is as this view that he chose this term Bahujan. This category of political Bahujan turned out to be one of the most imaginative political categories in post-independent India, as it succeeded in overturning the cliché generalization that the deprived classes are always submissive bearers of political power. Through Bahujan identity, Kanshiram proposed to reject the mainstream formulation based on class, religion and secularism because they favor and legitimize the control of upper caste over the rest. These idioms of political philosophies were regarded by those of the social elite who designed to disregard the aspiration of Dalits and lack any radical program to bring out social transformation. The counter-narrative that Kanshiram built in the category of Bahujans sought to derive from the legacies of the Shudras and Ati-Shudra leaders from time to time of colonialism. He sought to discover the ideologies of Bahujan politics and in these leaders towards constructing a political discourse based upon Phule Ambedkar's thought. Kanshiram's political strategy had a revolutionary appeal amongst the lower caste group for a real social change in India. The idea of Dalitness became an identity to assert with. It offered the core value of Bahujan political philosophy. The result of Kanshiram's masterly strategy met with phenomenal electoral success. Within a decade, the BSP rose to power in Uttar Pradesh, and within 2 decades, it has its own magnificent victory in the 2007 assembly elections of Uttar Pradesh. The success of the BSP had galvanizing effect on Indian society, which has not only led to politically empower the Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes in UP, rather it has changed the discourse of political by bringing the Dalits to the center stage in the electoral politics. Such is the discourse in electoral politics now that no political outfit can disregard the political and social interests of the Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes in Indian politics. Further, they have shown the way to those who want a great and inclusive democracy, corruption-free society and state system based on the strict observance of law and constitutional norms. The rise of the Shudras and Ati-Shudras in electoral politics promises to infuse an enduring spirit in the whole democratic system for a required change. The rising political consciousness and participation in electoral politics of the Dalits has also witnessed an escalation of caste conflicts and violence. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a series of violent clashes across the country from Tamil Nadu in south to Punjab in the north and Bihar in the eastern part. In these clashes, Dalits are usually found at the receiving end. The conflicts are normally driven with the question of land and caste assertion. Land and material possessions still largely lie with the upper caste or the dominant caste, who engage in violence to protect their social position and material possessions. The clashes are often ideological and break over the questions of assertion by Shudras and Ati-Shudra castes for better wages and more humane and dignified treatment. To conclude this module, we have seen how the colonial rule enabled democratic principles and practices to emerge in the Indian context. These practices and these institutions that were inaugurated by colonialism enabled the Dalits, that is the former untouchables, the Shudras and the Ati-Shudras, who were a numerically predominant population here, to challenge politically and to contest power with the Savarnas in the Indian context. This happened across India, and in the post-independent period we see that it was this particular caste group that still got left away in the power dynamics. It was the middle castes, those between the Shudras and the Savarnas, that emerged as the dominant caste. Thank you.